I want to see if we can have a small conversation about extraordinary sight. Some of you may have heard such stories as the following, accepted as fact, and I relate it to you with no editorial comment. For instance, there's more stories than this, but for instance, the story of a certain songbird that they have experimented with in this regard. There's another one of these examples of people trying to play around with the question of heredity versus environment. And this particular songbird, they found that if the chick was taken away from the natural environment of being around adult birds, that it would never develop its full song. That is, apparently, without any doubt, there is such thing as the environment. That I'm wrong. That the bird would sing some, but unless at this critical period, certain early days that they had figured down to a matter of days or a week, that if the bird was deprived of the environment of his elders, of hearing them sing, he would never develop his full song. That if later he was around it, it was as though he couldn't learn. And now, of course, they've taken this in the areas of childhood and etc. I'll bring this up to show you on the surface that me saying there's no such thing as the environment, given the two possibilities, this great binary question of it being either the environment or heredity influencing man's life, if not driving man's life, that here would seem to be an obvious example that there is an environment. Now, extraordinary sight is this. That whereas it would seem to be in this example, there would seem to be absolutely an environment which has a direct effect not only on this bird, but then obviously, or they think obviously, then there would be such a similar impact upon humans. But here is where extraordinary sight comes in. Here is what ordinary three-dimensional sight cannot see. And that is what appears to be, and this, I hope, as I gave it to you, a rather straightforward example, that what would seem to be the environment would actually be the internal workings of life's own genetics. That is, what seems to be the environment to 3D consciousness would in truth be the living reality of all of life's body. It would be, in my great equation of I plus not I, it would be the plus. And the plus to ordinary consciousness seems to be empty. Before quantum mechanics, it was the ether. But now it's just empty. It's non-existent. That is all three-dimensional sight can see. But I am here to tell you that if you could see four-dimensionally, you would see that life's body is alive everywhere. And what would seem to be, not just with the bird example, but I could have gone back and just played out verbally the kinds of things that ordinary psychology and ordinary common sense nowadays says, obviously, is the influence of one's environment. That is, other people. That there are other people out here separate from you. Other people, individuals, groups, cultures, religions, ideas, feelings, notions, hysterias, etc. And these things, regardless of what somebody like you says, that these things obviously move and affect another person. That seems to be undeniably the reality of, quote, environment. But if you could see in one more dimension, you would see that what seems to be mortal environment is simply the internal workings of life's own body. It is the internal workings of life's own genetic system. And there is no emptiness. There's no room for something to move from one person to another. To do that, you've got to believe that there is an empty space here. And that is the basis of this illusionary reality of there being an environment. That there is some sort of open system. That there is some sort of spontaneous generation, at least within motion, that suddenly some other person descends of the Father. Some other person can turn on you and say such and such, look at you in such and such a way, and it has an effect on you, perhaps a lifetime effect. That it just came out. They just did it. And conversely, something just makes you do something that you may have done, said to a family member years ago, and over which you now seem to pedal your way down the long road of continuing guilt, as though it was an open-ended system, and that suddenly, the second example to most people is not quite as straightforward as the first one, because everyone feels as though they made me do it. You're not quite sure who, but in other cases, nobody made this person do it. Nobody made this person insult you. Nobody made your mother beat you up when you were a kid. Nobody made your father treat you as though you were a second-handed clock. But there would have to be an emptiness. You would have to believe literally in the equation that I drew out years ago of I plus not I equals everything, which it does. It's just a silly, childish equation. It seems to cover everything, and it does, except the obvious, because the plus sign shows that me plus everything is not me. Put them all together, and it spells everything. But the plus sign has got to represent a certain amount of emptiness. That there's got to be space, there's got to be room, there's got to be time between you and other people for the environment to take place. But if you could see in another dimension, you would realize that you are not seeing people floating around in some isolated, open-ended system. That is not what you're seeing. You are seeing the workings of a greater system. And in this system, everything is alive. Whereas ordinary consciousness sees this, although this is not the term, but surely by now all of you can realize that I'm not even stretching the language. Although ordinary consciousness would not speak of such things as emptiness, that is what they're saying, that there has to be emptiness. There has got to be time and space. There's got to be room between you and your mother for her to have said, you're an ugly little fucker, or no, I didn't get you anything for your birthday, and shut up, or whatever it seems to be your particular trauma. Or the never-ending, apparently, or seemingly string of women who used to, when you invited them out to the prom, etc., would go, ha, you? And there it is. It took up the space, the emptiness between the cheerleader and you. That you said, would you like to go out? And it traveled from you to her, and apparently she ran this through. She said, me, go out with you, and the message goes back from her through this emptiness to you, and the deed is done. You have been environmentally impacted. Whereas if you could see in another dimension, there is no emptiness. It is not a matter of some kind of isolated energy, emotion, thought, going from one person to another. We're simply in the middle of a living system. It's all alive, and you would then see that there is no emptiness. You would see that all parts, including what appears to be emptiness to 3D consciousness, is alive, and it is active with energy and information. I bring this up tonight, or I did if I didn't do enough of an obvious preface, to make you see that with ordinary consciousness, although let us assume that most of you on a good night or at a good moment now have thought you believed, thought you understood of me pointing out that given the two choices of environment versus heredity, there is no environment. And I tried to expand it for you several weeks ago when I pointed out, or several months ago, I pointed out, all right, we could say that there is such thing as an environment. But all it is everybody else's genetics. But we're still talking about the same thing. We're talking about your genetics and everybody else's. But theirs goes by a nom de plume called environment. But I brought this out tonight so that ordinary consciousness, you had the chance to see that in your ordinary consciousness, a story about the songbird, and I'm relaying it to you just like I heard it, and I believe it. I have no doubt about it. It would sound as though, in that case, at least on the bird level, there's got to be a reality to environment. And I'm vaguely aware that in child psychology they're now playing around about the crucial times, and if children are not exposed to certain things at a certain time, they don't seem to ever learn it. They can't pick it up. So obviously, there has got to be some kind of nutrition, something coming from outside of oneself. Hence, there is environment. And hence, I've been wrong. Or else you hadn't understood correctly whatever parallel or whatever parody, whatever parable I'm trying to draw out. But I'm trying to get you to see even more extraordinarily so tonight that it's all true. Except what seems to be environment has to take into account, at least tacitly, that there is empty space, that there is an emptiness between you and I, between you and everyone else. And it's not so. And if once you saw that it is all alive and it is all active with information and energy, then you could also see how ordinary consciousness believes quite properly at that level, at that dimension, that there is an environment, that people do individually affect each other. And you would also understand why consciousness cannot go back any further than the Old Testament dictum about the sins of the fathers come down to the sins of the son. Hey, that was good enough. The gods, the Hebrews believe that. It's been around this long. It must be true. And of course, then you can't ask consciousness, well, wait a minute. Then that means that the sins of the grandfathers were the sins of the fathers. Oh, yeah, I guess. But then that means the sins of the great-great-grandfathers are the sins of the grandfathers. Yeah, but listen, don't keep this up. I got to go. I can't stay here all night. Plus, it seems to have now lost its meaning. It has become too complex. If you recall also fairly recently, I pointed out to you that one of life's dirty questions again was of asking artistes, painters, writers, musicians, that life, that is, other people, seems to confront their art and then say, yes, but what does it mean? Several weeks I've skimmed around this, and I pointed out that you could find an internal parallel to this. Then I even once expanded a little bit to say not only is that dirty, there's a dirtier part, in a sense. And that was, not only does life continually arrange to have somebody pop up to an artist and say, yes, 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 yes. But what does it mean? The dirtier part is that not only life does that, then life ordinarily makes ordinary artists try and answer. That's dirty part, at least 1.8 or 1.5. But now let me expand a little more and make it life's dirty question, part 2. Or the GTQ, the great tacit question. That you do not have to have any semblance, you don't have to have any pretensions to be an artiste, because life is demanding continually of everyone, not just artists, but now make it artists/people, everybody. That life is demanding of each person continually. Of all right? And that's looking upon your art, which is your life. And it's looking at you and saying, all right, well, what does it mean? And ordinary people cannot answer this. They do not know. Therefore, they are energized to try and answer it. And here you come to the great world of conclusions, the great world of attempting to explain oneself. Because life is doing this. You oftentimes look upon the people that life presents to you and everyone else to ponder your life, and they may only ponder it for 5 seconds. Or they may apparently have pondered your life for 25 years. But someone is always looking at your life, and it may be en passant, a matter of minutes, of seconds. Or as I said, it may apparently be one of your loved ones or one of your family, but someone apparently is gazing upon your work of art, which is simply your existence in this case, and it's going, yeah. Like it's looking, acknowledging the fact that here you are, I see you, there you are. Perhaps it's making some notation, at least tacitly, of something you've just done, something you were reputed to have done, something that you apparently have yet to do. And this thing, this apparent other person, this part of life's body seems to look upon your work of art, that is your life, and goes, yeah. But what does it mean? And the ordinary, not knowing what it means, are driven. They are forced to attempt to answer it. Why do you think people stay alive? Why do you believe that the whole world, except of course you and I, do not understand that the way out is simply suicide? They are driven to try and answer this question, and they can't. Of course they could, nobody would have any fun. Nobody would work, nobody would get up in the morning, nobody would shave, nobody would bathe, nobody would buy underarm deodorant, and nobody would care that the others didn't buy it. You can see this everywhere. I'm not going to make this of any kind of task, because you can see, those of you that can hear this right now, most of you I believe heard it tonight, life is continually demanding of you. Now apparently at times it's coming from a specific person. At other times it is like the great tacit question. It's like almost a fog in your neighborhood over your life, that there seems to be this unusual high pressure system, that something is pressing down on you, but what it is this great tacit question going on of life saying, well, yeah. Yeah, but what does it mean? And you're attempting to answer it. But at the ordinary level, I assure you, no one knows. From the Pope on down, or from the Pope on up, presidents, priests, nobody can answer the question. That's what keeps the churches going. That's what keeps governments going. That's what keeps individuals going. Is you feel as though I have got to answer it. And that does not matter how tacit you seem to be wired up to be. Because you are still, if you're ordinary, you are still feeling this continual pressure. It's a demand that life itself, and apparently, as I said, at times coming through identifiable individuals, but everyone at the ordinary level feels this pressure, that this unspoken something, people call it conscience, people call it supernatural sensitivity, people call it consciousness, people call it being alive, but they feel this continual questioning of them, that something, someone, some force is gazing upon their work of art, their life, their existence here, and the thing is going, yeah. But what does it mean? Now, I started off months ago doing this about art, and I understood at the time that all of you didn't feel as though you got something out of that, because some of you did not feel that close to ordinary art. But this goes on at the so-called critical level in life. The critics, writers, commentators, people off the street wander into an art gallery, let's say painting, and somebody will look at a non-representational piece of art, and a critic, at least used to a critic would, but many people off the street, you know, this would still look at something like this and go, yeah. And, you know, they're saying to themselves, tacitly, you would assume, certain things like, well, you know, the color's not bad, and it brightens up this black wall back here. And they look at it, and it's got some kind of price on it, and they see other people looking at it very seriously, and they go, yeah. But their question is, they want to grab the artist and say, well, what the hell does it mean? That's dirty enough. But then the people who are driven to paint this, and I'm still talking at the horizontal level, not this, but ordinary painting. I'm not trying to make more out of it than it is. It's just simply what goes on in life. But then the people who are wired up to do this sort of thing part of what some of you didn't get when I first brought this up is then these poor artists, and I'm saying poor just a figure of speech, then they try to explain it. And those of you that don't think there's enough humor in the world is, read the New York Times or the New Yorker, or Harper's or something, and read criticism. Read interviews. It's really funnier than criticism. Is read interviews with artists, with musicians, of the guy saying, I've been studying your work, I've been following your work, and would you explain Symphony No. 3? Would you explain the 2 years of you doing the untitled blue and green paintings, as they're called now? And then read this artist, this writer, this musician attempting to explain what this means. Everyone, that's what I want you to see now, whether you have any minute brush with any sort of horizontal talent, such as painting, art, or music, even if you do not, you still feel this continual pressure that something, someone, is looking you over constantly. Going, yeah. Okay, all right. But what does it mean? What does your life, what does your existence, what you're doing now, what does it mean? And no one knows. You know that by now. All the religious thinkers, all the philosophers, everybody says, we don't know. But the pressure of this continual demand to answer that energizes, and it keeps things running. We're still talking about sight. To 3D consciousness, there's something I want you to try and get a glimpse of. That could be, let's say that we are speaking, or I am speaking, topographically. And then 3D consciousness sees that everything that occurs has a binary spin to it. That everything going on has a binary spin in that it is trying to get from one position, one place, one condition, one state to another, the other being a conclusion. Let us imagine that streams, rippling brooks, were conscious. They would have dreams of satisfactory conclusions. They would dream of eventually reaching the sea, which they all do. That would be their conclusion. That would be the satisfaction. That would be the end of the binary spin. It would be the basis, the unrecognized basis of the reality, the topographical reality of their world, that I will eventually reach the sea. But what these streams could not anticipate with that kind of consciousness is that there is a trinary whirl, and that they are going to be ultimately drawn up from the sea back up into the heavens to be finally redeposited, not finally, but again redeposited as rain back in a what? A stream. But three-dimensional consciousness cannot find a way in, cannot find a way out, and it sees a great deal of emptiness between what appears to be alpha and omega. That the conclusion for the stream would be a form of death. The conclusion is that I in some way merge with a greater reality. I go from this little stream into, compared to a stream, the limitless vistas of the oceans. And there I will, I guess, be at peace. At least I will have come to my rightful conclusion. And the stream would be right. It's got no choice. It's going to end up in the ocean. But what is consciousness? I'm giving it 3D consciousness, the same as ordinary people have. What it cannot anticipate, what it cannot perceive, is that it is not going to be a conclusion, because it is ultimately going to be drawn into a right angle predicament, or a right angle non-expected inevitable, in that it will be drawn up, it will be blown away from where it was drawn up, over at another right angle, back over to land. It will suddenly rain, and it will suddenly be in the midst of the rain, it will be part of the rain, and it will be back into a stream. And I guess we could say, if you insist, that it could start all over and dream again of a satisfactory conclusion, of getting out of being a stream into my rightful conclusion of being part of the oceans. Now, let's really take a wild ride before I conclude. To take ordinary terminology and to draw you a picture that you should be able to follow, there's not going to be by any means approaching perfection. And although this will perhaps make as much sense as is possible with words, it is not going to be as sensible as you think it might be. First off, if we said that a person with one eye, and I think this is accepted more or less as a fact, that with one eye you have almost no depth perception. I think they would say that you have none. And everybody can try this. That with one eye you can see two-dimensionally, up and down and this way, but you got no depth perception. That's just an accepted scientific fact. You get two eyes, and what have you got? You can see three-dimensionally. And then the depth comes in. Now you do realize that everyone has two eyes. They have two eyes here, and internally you've got two eyes. You have got a partnership. Now, whatever I might mean by extraordinary sight would at least be beyond the realm that is possible for everyone, and that is a three-dimensional sight. So we would obviously be talking about, at a bare minimum, four-dimensional sight. But now, sticking still with ordinary words and terminology, you do all know that we, at least in the 20th century, are considered to be inhabitants of a four-dimensional world. The continuum of time and space. That time is indeed the fourth dimension, and that's not hard to fathom what they mean. I'm talking about ordinary people. But you do not live with any kind of four-dimensional consciousness. But here is how I can take the ordinary descriptions and show you what would be extraordinary, and you should be able to follow this. If you could see, that is, if you could be conscious in four dimensions continually, what you would be dealing with would not only be the just ordinary three-dimensional reality, but now, again, I remind you, I'm just taking ordinary descriptions and terminologies as they're accepted now. A four-dimensional consciousness would be a continual awareness of time, not of time and then and/or three-dimensional space, but it would be literally, as the quantum mechanics coined the term of the time-space continuum. And I believe that science fiction has taken that and run way off somewhere, but I keep hearing the term float around. It sounds so mystical and complicated. But here is what it in truth would be. For me to take it and try and stretch your attention somewhere else, you would have to have the continuing awareness of regular three-dimensional reality, as it is. but it would have to be a simultaneous continuing awareness of time in this respect, particularly. That if you had this continuing awareness of time and regular three-dimensional reality, you would then have a continuing awareness of all objects, all predicates, all nouns, all verbs, all tenses. As being part of a continuum, in that each of these things, these possibilities I've mentioned, nouns, verbs, tenses, objects, predicates, that they all, given enough time, and all it takes is your lifetime, that all of them you can perceive have at one time been their own opposite and will do so again. You would then have the difference between a one-eyed person and then suddenly having depth perception in 3 dimensions. If you had the continuing 4-dimensional reality, that given the time of your lifespan, that everything you have ever seen has reversed itself. Everything that your consciousness has ever perceived to be proper has at some time been improper, that same thing. Or to use my passing description and enumeration of forces, that everything that at once seemed to be channels for C, before your life is out, and maybe before you can blink, now apparently is a conduit for D. And that which at one time you saw as being obviously manifestations of D now strike you as being irrelevant. They're now E. But the same way that a one-eyed person has no depth perception, a two-eyed person, only working off the internal partnership, only working off 2 eyes, does not have that 4-dimensional field of depth, in that to realize that what seems to be reality out here continually changes, and changes so much even within your lifetime or within the bat of your eye time, that everything that you see as being this has also been its opposite. Everything that you have praised, you have condemned, etc. You know that song by now. You can't remember it. Man is not wired up naturally to have this continuing awareness, but this is one description using ordinary terminology, ordinary ideas of what the ability of the extraordinary sight would be. You would not be looking upon people as being things. You would not be making demands. You would not have expectations of, how could you do this to me? How could you have lied to me? People haven't lied to you. Times change. And what this person said one time is no longer valid. You would see that things are not going downhill. You would see that things are not falling apart. Of course, you would see that things are going downhill, but the things going downhill are the things that were going uphill. And you would see that, well, I'm not telling you the truth, things are falling apart. But the things that are falling apart are the things that already came together and blossomed. You would have a depth of a field of vision that this idea, this belief that there is an emptiness wherein things can move from one person to another, you would say that that's not true. That everything is full up. It's only full up, they're understudies, waiting in the wings everywhere. All possibilities will be realized. All understudies will finally have their day on the boards. God's wife will finally get to sing. Everybody will finally get to sit in. And those that will sit in finally will take over and become the band. And those that were the band will die, they'll go away, they'll become plumbers, they'll get drunk, they'll get sober then, they'll come back to life, then they'll sit in. But ordinary consciousness, two-eyed consciousness, which always remember whatever number that they want to put on dimensions, two-dimensional reality or 3 dimensions, you've always got taken their descriptions, ordinary fact. Remember, you've always got to have one more eye than the number of dimensions. To see 2-dimensionally, you've got to have at least one eye. To see so-called 3-dimensionally, you've got to have 2 eyes. but to see four-dimensionally, to be able to see just ordinary reality, physical reality, 3D reality, with a continual, simultaneous awareness of time, using their description of time being the fourth dimension. I'm not arguing, I'm just giving you this tonight, using ordinary current descriptions. For you to have that kind of consciousness in 4 dimensions, you got to understand, you got to have 3 eyes. There's no way out. And of course, I am not now talking about you have to develop a 3rd eye in your forehead or in your elbow or in your armpit. But you have got to have 3 internal eyes to see 4-dimensionally. You've got to. You'll never see the depth of it. You'll never see that there is a continuing, absolute, inseparable connection between what is ordinarily called time and then what is ordinarily called the 3 dimensions of space, just ordinary reality. But as long as you're dealing with 3-dimensional consciousness, then everything gets chopped up. That you cannot deal with what seems to be physical reality going on and time simultaneously. You have to stop. You have to stop as though you were dealing with the kind of mathematical graphs of trying to plot mathematically time into space. But for the coordinates meet, you have to stop and think, wait a minute, you got to be mad now, you got to think about what happened, what this person did before, then you got to get mad about that then, and then you got to go back to being mad now, then you got to think about who it was that made me mad. You got to separate them. That's the only way consciousness will work. If it would work the way I'm talking about, then people wouldn't be people. You couldn't be mad at anybody. Because everybody you've ever been mad at, you've been non-mad at. Everybody that you hated, sometime you didn't hate. Everything that you say that you disapprove of, at one time you approved of, and vice versa. And of course, the real kicker to all this being is all this is also, we're back to having to use 3-dimensional terminology, it would also all seem to be self-directed, which psychologists would say is the basis of all the problem. And if you're going to live in a 3-dimensional world, why not? They're right. At least that offers some hope for a conclusion. I've got several people have written questions here from out of town in the last couple of months that I have got to respond to. Some of the people have seen some of the tapes, and once or twice I have covered an area that could be summed up, as they remembered it, as fuck health. And people have had some very, as you might imagine, just having limited, if perhaps one-time exposure to seeing a tape where I mentioned something like that. And I've had inquiries over the last several months that are finally piled up, and I think I should say a little something. Somebody even asked, does that mean that I don't believe in health? Now think about that. I was almost certain I'd get a laugh, but that's not the point. I didn't do it just for a cheap laugh. But think if you just gone in and saw a tape or somebody encouraged you and you were in some city, and there I was, or somebody, in one part of the tape they seemed to talk a few minutes about health or something and said the real motto you should keep in mind is like fuck health. And you were waiting, you thought, maybe some of it that night the tape made a little sense, or you thought some of it had a good feel to it, but you thought, what in the hell does that mean? And then they write me, dear sir, does that mean you don't believe in health? Now think about it. I mean, is that your choice? You believe in health or otherwise? No, I don't believe in health. The question is not ridiculous on the face. It's, would you believe in health? No, I don't. No, that's ridiculous. But it's also ridiculous to answer it positively. It's ridiculous to answer it. To say, do you believe in health? All right, yeah. That's just as ridiculous as, do you believe in health? No, I don't. Certainly don't. The little bit is, about as far as I've ever taken this, for you people that thought you missed something, you should first realize that, quote, health is one of life's more enduring, useless hobbies. And to do this, you cannot let yourself get involved with routine hobbies. But that's one of the great ones. You should realize it. Television, newspapers, magazines. Anytime you got to fill up dead space, for a while I recognized singing, at least in showbiz itself, is let people sing. It's easier to sing somebody else's song than it is to be a comedian, for instance. But at any rate, that gets off on another subject. But now they can fill up time easier. And it's not anybody's fault. It's a conglomeration of everybody. It's not one group impacting some other group. It's the living reality inside of life's body. But now it's health. They can do it cheaper, turn on a talk show, turn on a magazine show, the news, the nightly news. Almost every periodical now has something, your health today, your health this month. Dr. Jones talks about your health. Nurse Smith talks about your health. Just anytime they want to fill up space now, it's not, hey, bring on a singer. Just bring on a doctor, and there he is. He says, what's the illness this month? What's the malady this month? What's the illness this week? And they talk about old ones. They're coming back in fed. More and more people are now getting the gout again. Oh, really? So we've now discovered a new description of headaches. And they bring on a guy, and it's obvious by now, you should hear me, that you can pick up the phone, any talk show, any morning news program, and then get a doctor over there to talk about an illness faster than get a singer. And apparently, since they keep up with such things, apparently it has a following, and people listen. They listen to the brand new illness of the week or the malady of the month, and they check their heart and they get their blood pressure. You got to see it as a useless hobby. In a sense, we're all unhealthy. In a sense, we're all headed for the sea. I thought I'd say that tonight and tell you, so making you feel bad talking about you're going to die and buy the farm. We're all simply headed from our stream into the seas. I'm still going to die. But between here and there, it's similar to last week. If you can hear me, you either got to buy it all or quit shopping. Your health, for people involved with this, that's all I'm talking to. And you people, and somebody just getting exposed to this, just hearing this, is kind of irrelevant to you. Because out in life, as I was pointing out, health is a serious hobby. It's big biz. It is a real hobby. It is a part of the discomfort. It is a part of the pressure of what does it all mean? What does your life mean? Part of your life means that I am sick. If I'm not sick now, I'm going to be sick tomorrow. And of course, the tacit sickness that nobody wants to talk about is eventually joining in the oceans. But it is so natural that everybody falls into it. Everybody's got a piece of it, and I don't mean that you have to qualify as a clinically diagnosed hypochondriac. That's what they call hypochondriacs in certain parts of Alabama. It's people that build up imaginary illnesses. You've got to see that everybody naturally has a piece of this, that everybody wants to whine, everybody wants to complain about their health, everybody wants to think about it, everybody is open to hear the doctor show up for the week and say, well, a surprising number of people we've now found in the eastern United States in the last 2 months that have a brand new affliction. And you find yourself listening. They say the symptoms are kind of strange because it starts off and it just feels like a cold. And you go, and it says, it's surprising the number of people that at first thought, well, it's a little cold with a perhaps more severe headache than usual. It is a routine hobby, and you cannot do it. It's the kind of thing, and I'm sure that some of you who wondered what I meant by fuck health probably find this almost as disturbing, if you don't listen better, as me saying people that worry about they have a hobby or a habit. Smoking is the one I keep hearing people ask about, and I told you that it's, for those who know how to do it, it is almost as good. You'd be almost in the same position instead of worrying about should I quit smoking, if you could quit thinking about quit smoking. You got to do one or the other. Any hobby, any habit, anything you're trying to change, you're going to be ordinary. You're stuck with the binary spin of I don't like this, and should I stop? All right? You either got to stop or you got to stop trying to stop. You got to stop thinking about stopping. You got to stop worrying about stopping. You got to stop being concerned over the fact that you can't seem to stop. You got to go ahead, if you're going to collect stamps, and spend every cent you got, sell all your clothes, and buy every damn stamp you can find. Every time a new stamp comes out and you got another $1, buy it. Either that or stop it. It's the same thing. It looks like a binary choice, and it looks like it goes in two different directions, and me saying either be healthy or just fuck it. Just fuck health. Quit worrying about it. It sounds like, well, that's two different things. You're either saying, it's only two choices. You either got to be in favor of health, or you're going to say that you don't believe in health. Now, which is it? It's the same thing. And that's all I mean by fuck health. That's not all I mean, but that's all I mean. Is there, and it severely, a little more than ordinary at least, strikes those that believe they're engaged in all kinds of New Age metaphysical activities. That's always, at least in the three-dimensional world, where you find the hotbed of people trying to find nirvana in food, trying to find the true ambrosia, the fruit of the gods, some kind of diet that is going to expand my consciousness and make me a more spiritual person. That's just a hobby. It's no different than being a Catholic and dressing up funny. It's no different than being a Jew and wearing a hat in the house all the time. It's just a hobby. There's nothing wrong with it. But this idea that there's something important about food, that's only for the ordinary people. That's only for people with routine hobbies. You cannot stay involved with that. You got to see it, and then you got to realize what I mean by fuck it. I'm still alive. I'm doing all right. And those that are properly attracted to this, which I can't help, and I don't even care to explain, not going any further, those properly attracted to this, if you'll notice, once if you ascertain absolutely that you are part of the properly attracted crowd, you find out that health is kind of just a nebulous thing. It's not a hobby. It's not something to play with. It's not a collection to take out like your stamps and look at it and examine yourself. You're just kind of healthy. Either that or you're not. You're going to die, I guess. I mean, you're going to join the big ocean. But that is not a proper hobby at all. I'm serious. It's the only reason I said enough to, at one time, shock a few people's attention by hollering, fuck health. It is not a proper hobby. It's not something to play with. It's not something to spend your time with. If you're hurt, you know, as I said, if you got your arm broken, you got the bone sticking out, go get somebody to fix it. If you got cut real bad and you're bleeding, you keep holding it together and it seems like maybe you should have it stitched up, go down to the shoe repair place or get somebody, do something. But do not sit around and take your own blood pressure. Do not wait for the doctor to show up on the Today Show or the evening news or sometime and to talk about the latest breakthroughs in medicine. You'd be better off, believe it or not, keeping up with the NBA. I hate to put that on you, but even basketball games are better for you than listening to the doctor with the malady of the month. There's a quotation. Seems to be quite ancient, and I can't remember where it came from, but I've been reading it all my life, and that's ancient enough, that says, if their secret thoughts were known, all men would deserve to hang. And that seems true enough, do it not, except for this. That cannot be true for you people now. That is no longer an acceptable, it can no longer even be an acceptably true, correct statement of your condition. The noise that goes on in the partnership would truly make everyone from Moses and Jesus and Buddha on down, would make everyone from that viewpoint, quote, fit to hang, deserve to hang. And the noise in your own partnership is as hateful, prejudicial, jaundiced, unthinking, uncaring as anybody's, including Moses and Buddha and Muhammad and Jesus. But once you realize that you are not part of the many, that you are not absolutely captive of a two-eyed partnership with three-dimensional consciousness, to what automatically goes on in you, including what the old quote says, if they're secret thoughts, that you understand that your secret thoughts are not your secret thoughts. They're not yours to begin with. They're not secret to begin with. They're shared by everyone, at least at one time or the other, if you could see four-dimensionally. They're not yours. You didn't invent them. You didn't buy them. You didn't acquire them. So they're not yours. They're everybody's. Once you realize that, only then do you become responsible, because then you cannot let this tiger out of its cage. You cannot take that radio station. You cannot take WDNA as being you. You cannot let the volume run and you listen to it and merge with it. When your own voices suddenly make some prejudicial, some angry statement at some person because of their race, just pick out obvious ones, or their religion, or their sex, or their apparent economic station in life, whatever it is. Now that, is, of course, is the kind of basis in life's body that brought about such quotes as, if their secret thoughts were known, all men would deserve to hang. That is, that all men, including the popes and the rabbis and everybody, somewhere has cursed their neighbor, has made some kind of racial or sexual or religious negative comment towards someone else. Everybody has. Then ordinary people look for a conclusion, though. First conclusion is why it ain't my fault. My father did it to me. My environment did it to me. I grew up with a bunch of bigoted rednecks. I grew up in a very closed, tight-knit community, and then they hated everybody that was not of our religion. Whatever it is. You're looking for a conclusion. That is ordinary consciousness. It's trying to. It believes it would be satisfactory. It believes it would be satisfying if indeed I can come to this conclusion. In finding it can't, it will even pay people to help me apparently come to this conclusion. They're known as priests. They're known nowadays as psychiatrists. They're known as family. It's part of, if you recall, the use of human talk, is to adjust and prepare oneself for the continuing inevitability of it all, of being oneself. But the few people that understand that what I am wired up to be, this radio station that runs full time, I at times can separate from it enough to know that it's possible. Once that happens, then you're responsible. It doesn't matter if that station keeps playing, at least as far as you would be concerned, unhealthy songs, giving out judicial, prejudicial commentaries about other people. But once you realize that that radio is not me, and I wasn't me until I got to the point that I have produced almost another me inside of me. This me I'm responsible for. And if this me I let merge with that noise, you do deserve to hang. But only you, not the rest of these bastards. They don't deserve to hang. They just believe they do. That's the only reason they have truisms and Afroisms and Asianisms. They believe they do deserve to hang because they believe that the noise is them. And if they believe the noise is them and they find no exception to it, then, of course, guess what? The noise is them. But once you've reached a place that you understand through your own experience that the noise is not me, then you're responsible. The rest of them don't deserve to hang. But if you let yourself take the noise and you merge with it You let the volume come out, and suddenly there is a great right-wing religious commentator, Billy James Redneck, attacking everybody that's not a Southern Baptist, and you let the volume turn up so loud, and you let go of your own awareness that that noise is not me, and suddenly it's just like you're laying down there about to doze off listening to some maniac on the radio rant and rave, and suddenly somebody comes up and punches you and says, it's time to go. All of you know this, and you were there, and you and the voice coming out of the little radio, you and the voice were one. Yeah, I can explain it away physiologically. I was about to doze off into the arms of Morpheus. I was about to go to sleep, and my own brain waves were getting slowed down, and the noise, the external environment, the impressions from the radio, I don't believe that crap. But you were merging with it. You had lost even the semblance of any kind of separation or control over it. Now, of course, you got to take all that internally. The noise that's your own DNA, your own genetic system, the noise it makes, and it makes it in everybody. I don't care if you were Buddha's granddaughter or Moses' great-great-great-great-grandnephew. Genes make noise. If you got a yellow circuit, the noise has a voice. It is beyond the point of noise. It now seems to be rational. It now seems to be intelligent. It is what passes off in the ordinary currency as consciousness. As long as you merge with it and know nothing else, you only think you deserve to hang for your secret thoughts. But once you understand that I am more, me personally, of course, at the same time, once you get to that point, you understand that you and me may be the only two in the world. The rest of these people here, maybe. The only people you're sure about is me and you. That we don't have to do this. But then if you merge with it, you do deserve to hang. You people cannot do it. But you can't suffer over it. It's just noise. But you've got to know that you don't have to be it. And once you know that, you can quit collecting it. You can quit shopping. Adios, partners.